All right, so Stephen Donziger has officially been sentenced to 6 months in a federal prison. And just to give you a reminder as to who Stephen Donziger is, so this was a human rights lawyer who basically spent decades fighting Chevron and former Texaco, which was bought by Chevron, fighting them in the Amazon, representing the Ecuadorian people who have been affected by basically complete destruction of an area that is the size of Rhode Island in the Amazon rainforest that Chevron completely obliterated with their pollution. And this guy, Stephen Donziger, was representing 30,000 plaintiffs from Ecuador as they were bringing this case against Chevron, and they actually won. And the result was Chevron was supposed to be forced to pay nearly $10 billion, essentially to clean up the mess that they had caused. And in response to that, did Chevron end up paying that money to go and actually clean up the mess that they caused? No, they actually turned around and brought a case against this human rights lawyer. And now, after the U.S., incredibly corrupt U.S. judicial system has worked its way through all of this, they have decided that the human rights lawyer is the guy who should be spending time behind bars after nearly 2 years of house arrest, not the Chevron executives who actually caused the pollution. They should get to walk completely scot-free. So I got a good article here from The Nation, which is basically breaking it down. So I want to give you some of the details, but just to give you an initial primer as to how ridiculous this entire situation is, okay, the UN has already ruled. They did this right before this this ruling came down from this judge here in the United States. But the United Nations rules that Stephen Donziger's house arrest violates international law. Okay, they have been keeping this guy under house arrest for 2 years for basically nothing. Okay, they have just been trying to completely sabotage and ruin this guy's life because he was able to bring a successful case against a gigantic U.S. corporation. So, is Chevron's vendetta against Stephen Donziger finally backfiring? Well, hopefully, but here are some of the details. Stephen Donziger, the human rights lawyer who spent nearly 3 decades fighting Chevron on behalf of 30,000 people in the Ecuadorian rainforest, has been sentenced to 6 months in federal prison for criminal contempt. And on October 1st, in a lower Manhattan federal courtroom, Judge Loretta Preska justified imposing the maximum penalty by asserting that Donziger, now 60, had not shown contrition. She said, quote, this is absolutely insane. It seems that the only proverbial 2x4 between the eyes will instill in him any respect for the law. So a judge literally invoking violence, right? The proverbial 2x4 between the eyes, in a point to say he doesn't have any respect for the law. The guy who is a human rights lawyer representing average innocent people in Ecuador who had their lives obliterated by Chevron, that guy who won the case against Chevron is the guy who doesn't have respect for the law, not Chevron, which was illegally and criminally polluting in the Amazon rainforest, potentially killing people because they have increased cancer rates and all of these other associated illnesses because of the pollution. Chevron is not guilty in this situation. Chevron has respect for the law, somehow, according to this judge. But they continue saying that in May, this same judge had found Donziger guilty after a trial without a jury, and he has not had a jury throughout this entire judicial process, which is, insane in and of its own right, because he's basically going to end up spending 2.5 years either behind jail or under house arrest for a crime that was completely minuscule, and he never got to see a jury or present it to a jury. And the reason for that is because they know, Chevron knows, their lawyers know, and these judges who have connections to Chevron know that if they did bring it in front of a jury, that people would side with him because he obviously is in the right in this situation. But they continue saying that, and now Donziger, along with his family and scores of supporters, had to listen to this federal judge compare him to a mule who needed to be beaten with a piece of wood before complying. And prior to sentencing, Donziger reminded the court in a polite and at times emotional statement that he had already spent 787 days under house arrest in his New York City apartment, a confinement that had put great pressure on his wife and teenage son. And he explained that the court-imposed restriction meant that his son had a father who was, quote, unable to travel, leave his home except under narrow exceptions with court permission 48 hours in advance, unable to go out for dinner, unable to have a father capable of doing all of the things a father can and should do with a child, including act with spontaneity. So they have completely ruined this guy's life. But even though Donziger was facing prison, he told the court that he would not back down. Quote, I have been attacked and demonized for years by Chevron in retaliation for helping indigenous peoples in Ecuador try to do something to save their cultures, their lives, and our planet in the face of massive oil pollution. That's the context for why we are here today, and he's absolutely right. This was essentially a prosecution by Chevron, okay? And Donziger will not go to prison immediately. His attorneys will challenge the criminal contempt conviction, and they will also ask a higher court to put off his prison sentence pending that appeal, but Prescott will keep him under house arrest, and this is even more ridiculous, but once again calling him a flight risk. In the past, she has warned that he has ties to Ecuador, insinuating that he would abandon his family in his New York City apartment to go live in the fucking rainforest. Okay, so this judge is completely corrupt and a complete fucking idiot liar, right? Okay, this is ridiculous to suggest that he would be a flight risk to Ecuador. Why? Because he has ties to Ecuador, meaning he represented indigenous people there who were trying to get reparations for the pollution that Chevron had caused. Yeah, that means he's a flight risk. It's just completely ridiculous top to bottom. And they continue saying that, just to give you a little bit of background here, you can't understand this latest injustice without looking back at Chevron's long campaign against Donziger, who won a landmark pollution case against the oil giant in Ecuadorian courts in 2013, and Chevron was ordered to pay $9.5 billion to clean up the contaminated area the size of Rhode Island and to pay for the healthcare of the 30,000 plaintiffs whose communities have seen rising numbers of cancer cases. And instead of following the legal order, Chevron launched a case in New York, and in 2014, a federal judge, Lewis Kaplan, who has ties to Chevron, found Donziger and some of his Ecuadorian allies civilly liable for racketeering, bribery, and fraud, which there was essentially no evidence for whatsoever. And then Kaplan asked the federal judge prosecutor for the Southern District of New York to put Donziger on trial for criminal contempt connected to the original conviction, and this federal prosecutor refused. So, and this is just fucking crazy, okay? So understand, the Southern District of New York, okay, this prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, they asked this Southern prosecutor to put him on trial. The prosecutor said no, because this case is bullshit. And so instead, Kaplan handpicked an attorney from a private firm with connections to Chevron, Rita Glavlin, to prosecute a nearly unprecedented legal maneuver. So when the federal prosecutor from the Southern District of New York says, no, I don't want to prosecute that case, instead of just dropping it altogether, they instead hire a hand-picked attorney from a private firm that has connections to Chevron. It's completely corrupt, completely ridiculous, and completely absurd. But listen, the overall picture here, first of all, Joe Biden could do something about this instantaneously if he wanted to. This is the same Joe Biden who goes around and pretends like he cares about climate change, right? This is the same Joe Biden who goes around and pretends like he's going to crack down on fossil fuel companies. Meanwhile, he's doing absolutely nothing about this. All he would have to do is tell Merrick Garland to go take up this case and then drop it. That's it. Or he could just straight up pardon. He could pardon Stephen Donziger now that he has been officially prosecuted. Joe Biden has the entire power under him in order to make this situation right, but he's obviously not going to, or at least hasn't as of yet. And maybe we can have some degree of a pressure campaign to try to get him to do that. But listen, what is this actually telling us, right? So what this is telling us is that Chevron and other corporations have complete control over our judicial system now, and the fact that he is going to be spending 6 years in federal prison for something as minuscule as a criminal contempt of court for not wanting to give his private information and break that attorney-client privilege, that attorney-client confidentiality between him and his Ecuadorian clients, because he didn't want to give that information to Chevron that they could then weaponize against him and the people in Ecuador. He's going to be facing nearly 787 days in house arrest, and on top of that, 6 months in a federal prison. And no, they're not going to count those 787 days towards that 6 months. So nearly 2.5 years, okay, this guy is going to be spending in confinement for the crime of basically getting one of these gigantic multinational corporations to actually pay for some of the damages that they have caused, to pay reparations for the pollution and the destruction that they have caused. So listen, these Chevron executives are the ones who should be behind prison bars, right? These are the people who should be in jail, right? They have caused people to have cancer because of this pollution. They have completely obliterated. Again, it's the size of fucking Rhode Island that they destroyed, okay? They basically completely obliterated the equivalent of an entire U.S. state, and they have no punishment for that. No punishment whatsoever. But the human rights lawyer who represents those people's lives who were affected, that's the guy who's going to be spending 6 months in a federal prison. It's just a complete joke, but it gives us an exact straight line view into how our judicial system actually functions, who it actually represents. This is the same idea after the 2008 financial crash, how Obama decided, oh, we're not going to be looking back, we're only going to be looking forward, and he decided not to go after any of the insanely corrupt executives who completely tanked the economy and walked out the back door with billions and billions of dollars. It's the same exact goddamn shit. Our entire judicial system serves to benefit basically global capital. That's it. That's all. And so when you are somebody who is brave like Stephen Donziger was, and is brave enough to go and try to bring a case against some of these global multinational capitalist corporations, then they are going to bring down the full force of our global capitalist system onto you. And that's exactly what we have seen here. So, credit to Stephen Donziger for trying to stay brave under the current condition, but it is absolutely insane and unacceptable that this guy is going to be spending even a single day behind bars. As the UN was saying, not only does he not deserve to be behind bars, not only is it a violation of international law that he is being punished in the way that he is, but he should be given reparations, and these Chevron executives are the ones who should be spending time behind bars.